Beckman from Central Valley Ag is our marketing analyst this week. The USDA is scheduled to release its September crop report Thursday morning at 11 a.m. Central Time. In its previous estimate, the agency projected record corn and soybean crops, and conditions since then have remained favorable. In fact, according to the USDA's weighting scale, the current U.S. soybean condition index isn't just remarkable since it's this late in the season. It's noteworthy because it's the third best rating at any point in the growing season over the last 20 years. We talked with Luke Wednesday afternoon at CVA's location in Humphrey and began by asking about current crop conditions.
Well, Jeff, on Monday, USDA looking at corn, overall good to excellent ratings, actually up a point. You know, that's counter-seasonal to what we would anticipate, especially for this August time period. So crops still very much in good shape. It's kind of becoming old news at this point. Corn is probably more about a progress problem, more so than conditions. So, you know, corn denting is behind average in pretty much every single state, you know, except for Illinois. So definitely going to be a conversation for the market in the coming weeks.
Soybeans condition holding in there as well, though?
Yeah, soybean conditions up as well, counter-seasonal to what we would anticipate. You know, progress-wise, they're on pace. Beans, it's a photo period plant determined by day length. So they're going to be, you know, pretty close to where they should be progress-wise.
Do we have any harvest numbers coming out from the south yet?
Harvest numbers out of the south have been very good. You talk about Delta soybeans have been excellent. Yields well above where they should be for them. Corn yields very much the same way. So if the south is any indication of what's going to happen as they work their way north, you know, we're going to have a big crop.
Yeah, and the USDA expects a record crop in both, and they'll update those numbers next week. But since there is going to be big crops in both corn and soybeans, which market do you think is better equipped to handle the supply that we're going to see after harvest?
It's a good question, Jeff, because, you know, big crops for both. You know, you think about where do our bushels go? You know, the corn market, we're positioned so much better in this country to handle that because we have ethanol stated right here. So ethanol and feed use are our two biggest buckets that consume corn. You talk about the soybean market, and we export, you know, a third of our soybeans, you know, to other countries. And so what do we have to rely on to get that done? The rail and barge freight. So it's a major problem. Everybody kind of knows that. Will the beans get shipped? Yeah, they will, but what does it mean? It backs up into weaker basis values at harvest.
Now, we know soybean exports have been good. Describe to me how good they've been and for how long they might be able to help this soybean market before a buyer would go to South America.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of tis the season for soybean export sales. They've been very active, you know, over the past several weeks, past month, and that'll continue. The pace has actually been ahead of last year's record pace. So soybean export sales, very, very good. You're going to have Brazil, it's going to compete with us like always. So, you know, soybean exports can be there, but it's all about supply outpacing the increase in demand this year, and that's what's leading us to a pretty sizable carryout in the soybeans.
Longer term, what's your price forecast for soybeans?
You know, soybeans, if you go back to carryout levels that we expect this year, you're going to go back to 2006, and I hate to even say it, but you definitely have single-digit soybeans. So, you know, there's not a lot of friendly people out there on the price of soybeans. So we'd anticipate that the funds are going to push this thing. You know, we're breaking support plans today. $10 is the next target, and we'd anticipate that it's going to go through that as well.
You mentioned the funds on soybeans. Where are they on corn?
You know, you're talking about corn funds, Jeff. You know, they have not pushed this market lower. They've gotten out, but they haven't pushed it lower. They're probably getting into that position here, breaking support today as well. So corn, you know, probably is going to be a victim of that a little bit here in the coming weeks.
There seems to be no incentive to sell corn right now, and there's probably a lot in storage as well. Maybe we'll see some numbers on that next week too. But what could that do once you get a record harvest plus a lot of storage? I mean, could we have a glut in the market at some point?
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to last year, at least locally for producers in Nebraska. I mean, you'll see bushels on the ground. I'm sure there's a lot of storage going up. So there'll be a lot of bushels around for sure. You know, you would think that it would manifest itself in weaker basis values, but you talk about this summer, the stuff's just not for sale. You know, guys have the bin doors locked. We'd anticipate that's going to happen again as soon as harvest is over. So you start talking December on out, you could see opportunities for basis. So we're going to anticipate that basis will show us opportunities this year for the simple fact that guys don't want to sell it at these prices.
Could there be a premium to getting into the market right away if it's dry?
Absolutely. You know, you go back to 2009, you know, we're going to have a lot of bushels, we know that, but it's all going to be stacked behind a dryer. So we're going to have those premiums for dry bushels. We'd certainly anticipate that. So that'll be a little bit of a salvation for a few producers.
And how does basis move on soybeans around harvest?
You know, soybeans, that go back to that rail comment. A lot of those beans are going to have to move early. Our export program is front-loaded. Everybody kind of knows that. So Again, bushels have to move. How do they get moved? You have to buy the expensive freight. It gets reflected in weaker basis values on soybeans.
Next week we get the September crop report. I misspoke earlier. The grain stocks report isn't until later in the month, but what do you expect next week?
Next week USDA is probably going to continue to stair-step yield estimates up. Biggest one probably expected October, November. So this market feels like a 175 yield number for corn. Don't think the USDA will go there next week, probably a low 170s, 71, 72, but a lot of private estimates this week pegging 174, 175s. Soybeans, we'd certainly anticipate the same thing. Going to add a couple bushels to that yield number from the private market. You probably see a bushel increase from the USDA next week.